Welcome to An Education the Grotesque, the Gargoyles of Yale University. I'm Mathew Duman. I'm a photographer and graphic designer who grew up just north of New Haven, Connecticut. I attended the gargoyle-free campus of Central Connecticut State University, but developed an appreciation for Gothic architecture while studying in England. Just over 10 years ago, while looking for a personal photographic project, I realized Yale architecture would be a great subject. I had walked around Yale a lot growing up, but I had never stopped to look at the detail in Yale's buildings until now. It came as no surprise that there are many historical references in Yale's architecture. But what drew me in was the artistry, social commentary, and above all the sense of humor and fun to be found there. I discovered a lot of things to photograph, but to truly appreciate them, I had to know what they meant. After a lot of research, I published the book An Education the Grotesque. From there, I began giving lectures and walking tours. If any of you have been to any of my events, you know that I lead them dressed in a safari outfit. Even though you cannot see me, I'm wearing it right now because it just didn't feel right to do this without my pith helmet and safari vest. Now, I'm not a psychic, but I do have the distinct feeling you are wondering why I would be dressed like this. It's because I'm going to take you on a grotesque safari to a place where you can observe the behavior of gargoyles in their natural habitat. In other words, the campus of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. Yale is a university with deeply rooted spirit and traditions. This is the result of a number of factors, not the least of which is the physical presence of the campus itself. Architecturally, cities happen largely by accident. In general, they develop as a patchwork of different architectural styles, each architect trying to make his or her own unique mark on the urban landscape. But other communities, like a college campus, tend to direct more attention to the cumulative effect of their buildings and open spaces. More emphasis is put on the harmony of these spaces toward each other and what the campus as a whole says about itself. The Collegiate Gothic architectural style is just that. It's a statement about the university, its history, customs, and values. In this style, these ideas can be dramatized quite literally in a building's decoration. Some interesting decorative elements of this trend are the grotesque and the gargoyle. Gothic architecture dates from medieval Europe, but the Gothic buildings that we see at Yale were built in the Collegiate Gothic style. This was a popular trend around the turn of the 20th century, when decorating their campuses with Gothic buildings was meant to give universities a rich sense of history and tradition. While these buildings at Yale look almost medieval, many are less than 100 years old. This means while Yale's grotesques and gargoyles may look very old, many are relatively modern in their concept and themes. My book is called An Education the Grotesque, the Gargoyles of Yale University. Notice I've used both the words grotesque and gargoyle in the title. Here's an example of a grotesque. It's a student, distracted from his textbooks by a newfangled radio set. This was produced around 1930, so the radio is an antique by modern standards, but the concept of being distracted by new technology has never been more relevant than today. A grotesque is defined as a decorative sculpture on or in a building, usually representative of a human, animal, or a fanciful creature whose form may be exaggerated to the point of caricature. The word gargoyle is from the Old French word gargouille, the root of the verb to gargle, because it refers to the throat or gullet. It's a specific type of grotesque that's used to channel rainwater off of the roof and away from the building, thereby protecting the masonry from erosion. So basically, it's a decorative rain spout. That having been said, I use these definitions in their broadest sense, to refer to any interesting decoration on or in a building. I took this photo in the wintertime, when many gargoyles sport long, icicle goatees. I'm sure you noticed that my photos are in black and white. I made this decision very early in this project. Most of these grotesques are not painted, so their only coloring comes from the material from which they are carved or molded. Therefore, the personality of these sculptures comes mainly from their shape, which, without color, is defined exclusively by the light and dark areas. With all the color included, you might have overlooked this handsome face, but more on him later. In this case, color is only a distraction. Black and white strips the image of distractions and allows the true character of Yale's grotesque to shine through. The first stop on our safari is Bingham Hall, which stands at the corner of College and Chapel Streets in New Haven. It was constructed in 1928 and has many memorials to Yale buildings and societies that have occupied this spot. But I'm interested in some of the other decoration, like this one, where university namesake Elihu Yale is shown in a crest flanked by these creatures. What are they? Turns out these are mythical creatures, called, appropriately enough, the Yale. The Yale is said to be similar to an antelope, but with independently swiveling antlers and a rather belligerent disposition. The Yale predates Yale University by almost 2,000 years, and was first described by Pliny the Elder, back in Roman times. I became curious about this Yale creature because it appears elsewhere in Bingham, and some of the other buildings around the campus as well. Here's the Yale near the top of Bingham's central tower as an adult, and midway up the tower in juvenile form. You can tell this one's a young one, because it is portrayed with little nubs for antlers and a comparatively large head. The Yale can be found elsewhere on campus, like the pediment area over the main entrance to the Timothy Dwight College. Because they never actually existed, these Yales are open to artistic interpretation. This version has spots, a tail like an elephant, an actual goatee, and an almost primate-like face. To me, it looks to be something from the mind of Dr. Seuss. Davenport College features two different types of Yale. On the courtyard side of Davenport's York Street building, the Yale appears as a muscular stallion. On the front of the same building, the Yale appears again as a fanciful Gothic pony. Why are there two different styles of Yale in the same building? Because there are two different architectural styles on this one building. From the courtyard, Davenport's York Street building looks like the rest of the college, designed in the Federal style, which is derived from the architecture of the Revolutionary War period, with red brick, white painted wood trim, with some decoration with very few grotesques. If you go through the exit tunnel and out to York Street, and then look back at the building you just walked through, you'll see the same building, but in the grotesque, rich, collegiate Gothic style. This is meant to harmonize with the other collegiate Gothic buildings across the street. On this side, the main entrance features students studying diligently, but there is another Yale family symbol. At the crown of the archway is a wild boar trapped in a net, a symbol from Elihu Yale's family crest. The entrance to the kitchen is demarcated by a platter of roast turkey. Just above this is Dr. Faustus, who, according to German legend, sold his soul to a demon for knowledge and power. These grotesques are strategically placed, serving as a warning to those who are gluttons for food, as well as those who are gluttons for knowledge and power. I include these because they demonstrate another point I want to make about Yale's grotesques. Sometimes it's not just the form of a grotesque that's important. Their location can play a significant role in their meaning as well. To further illustrate this, on one side of a window frame a student reads by oil lamp, the lamp from Yale's slogan, Light and Truth, with AC for academic college written below. On the opposite side, an engineer uses a surveying scope and plumb line, with Chef for Sheffield Scientific School below. These two grotesques are on opposite sides of the same window. Both schools were part of Yale College, but their placement on opposing sides of the window demonstrates the distinct entities these schools had become by the late 1800s. Vanderbilt Hall is a dormitory on Old Campus that's guarded by these ferocious canines. Near the top is a lion gargoyle. Note the drain in its mouth. Also note the square of foliage below it. There are many of these spaced around the corners of the building. But some of the others are strangely symmetrical, with recognizable facial features. Eyes, nose, mouth, and in this case, cheeks. The old art gallery houses many works of art, and there are many interesting ones on the outside as well, like these animal skulls. Note these rams have fleshed out bodies, but only skulls for heads. Why the skulls, you may ask? They illustrate an important aspect of art, that of exposing what lies below the surface, both literally and figuratively. There's also a wild boar, a primate, and another primate. I like the primates. I really like the expression on their faces. Others are more fantastic, like this chimera gargoyle. It looks to be an agglomeration of spare parts from the other grotesques on the building. Here's this guy again. He's a satyr from Greek mythology. His flagpole base stands as a memorial to Augustus Canfield Ledyard, who graduated from Yale in 1898, but was killed while a soldier in the Spanish-American War the following year. Though well tarnished after more than 100 years, I'll bet this face was still pretty ugly even when it was new. My first question upon learning Ledyard's story was, why would Ledyard's classmates put such an ugly face at the base of their memorial to him? Well, consider this. Ledyard died tragically and much too early. Even on this campus of learning and architectural beauty, this face is a shocking reminder of our own mortality, and not to take life for granted. Now currently, Ledyard Flagstaff has been removed for construction on Quadrangle. Will it come back? I hope so, that the facility they're building is underground, so there's a good chance it will come back. My research tells me that Collegiate Gothic architecture came into style on American college campuses in the late 1800s. This means that Yale's Dwight Hall must have been among the trendsetters that helped start this movement, since it was built some years earlier, in 1842. This is evident in the decoration. Not only is it older, Dwight's decoration is crafted somewhat crudely and seems less refined than Yale's 20th century grotesques. Berkeley College has a memorial to the Bronze Lions, which stood on this spot before these buildings were built. The originals can still be seen at the university power plant. Note the workman climbing the ladder on the left to show scale. He lost his head years ago. Berkeley College is named for George Berkeley, or more accurately, Bishop George Berkeley of Ireland, and his mitre rests on our weather vane atop Berkeley's south building. His Holiness's mitre can also be found decorating the niches on either side of Berkeley's entrance on Elm Street as well. Also notice the clover, which are symbolic of Bishop Berkeley's homeland of Ireland. A dormitory complex called the Berkeley Oval occupied the spot where Berkeley College now stands. In 1878, the world's first telephone exchange was installed here. It's remembered with this relief from Berkeley College's Elm Street facade and portrays a switchboard operator dressed as Cleopatra. Now, I don't think this is what the operators actually wore, but unlike the famous Egyptian queen, she wears headphones, has a telephone as well as a phone line in her right hand for connecting calls. A lot of people think the phone line looks a lot like an Egyptian asp. The exchange itself, called the Roundhouse, is shown at the lower left. On a personal note, I had read about this relief and tried many times to find it without success. I only saw it by chance while walking by on a winter's day because, as you see, it sits behind a tree, so it's hidden by leaves much of the year. This is the former location of Yale's post office, called Yale Station, so Berkeley has a cornice theme with objects used in the mail. There's envelopes, sealing wax, stamps, postcards, a cancellation stamp, and a postbox. A close look at the postbox reveals its owner's name to be Rogers. This is a reference to James Gamble Rogers, who was not only a Yale graduate, but the architect of this and many more of Yale's grotesquely infested buildings. Another of James Gamble Rogers' buildings is Memorial Quadrangle. This complex houses two residence colleges, Saybrook and Branford, named for the Connecticut towns that had played an important role in Yale's early years. A quick note on the dates, as you see here, I've listed two of them. Memorial Quadrangle was built in 1921 to house a senior class. In 1933, it was divided into residence colleges, similar to the system used at Cambridge and Oxford universities in England, and also at Hogwarts. So first is the year of construction, second is the year the building's current identity was established. The builders and designers of Memorial Quadrangle are memorialized here, like this engineer and architect. Note the spire in the architect's hand, and the flying buttress and masonry wall behind him. Other people associated with Yale are remembered here symbolically, like graduate Samuel Morse, who not only developed the electric telegraph and Morse code, he was an accomplished painter as well. Along Saybrook College's Elm Street facade, you can find shields, referencing some of Yale's secret societies, like Wolf's Head, Scroll and Key, and the society with perhaps the worst kept secrets, Skull and Bones. Originally I planned to say Yale's best known secret society, but for some reason, that statement never seems to make any sense. Branford College shares Memorial Quadrangle with Saybrook. Yale graduate and theologian Jonathan Edwards is the author of the famous sermon entitled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. With that in mind, it is not surprising to find him looking down in judgment upon the goings-on in Brothers in Unity Courtyard. An interesting thing about Memorial Quadrangle is, in addition to references to people and events of Yale's past, there are also some strange things as well, such as these characters roosting under a bay window. Are they bats? Frogs? They're really just some fanciful creature. This relief frames a small window. It depicts the Memorial Quadrangle complex under construction in 1920. You'll see many memorials to important Yale people and donors around the campus. But this one is dedicated to the workers who built Yale's buildings. Anyone know Latin? These words mean, these buildings stand as a testament to the skill of the artisans who built them. Yale knew, even before it was finished, the architectural significance of Memorial Quadrangle. Wrexham Tower is actually a replica of the tower at St. Giles Church in Wrexham, Wales. The original stands over the spot where Elihu Yale is entombed. The Yale version of the tower has decorative human grotesques around its facades, but a closer look reveals something else. Small versions of Yale's mascot, Handsome Dan the Bulldog, are hidden on the tower as well. similar to the hidden Mickeys of the Disney theme parks. To me, the Yale campus is a lot like Disneyland. Handsome Dan appears again at the entrance to Wrexham Courtyard, this time as different student characters. A football player, an ROTC officer that somebody drew a mustache on, and a nerd complete with glasses and bow tie. Okay, now a little aside to this part. When I was giving this lecture at a library in Connecticut, I didn't realize until after the presentation that the program coordinator who invited me to come to the library was wearing glasses and a bow tie. Harkness Towers is the most distinctive feature of Memorial Quadrangle. Like a film or stage prop, Harkness Tower uses forced perspective to appear taller than it actually is. The scale of the architectural elements gets smaller the higher they are positioned. The tower itself tapers and is divided into thin spires at the top. This mimics the convergent effects of visual perspective. As a result, a prominent tower appears much taller. Ironically, the tower looks taller the farther away you get. Also notice that most of its ornamentation is concentrated on the top half of the tower, suggesting it was designed to be seen from far away. Decoration positioned on the lower reaches of the tower would be obscured by trees and other buildings when viewed at a distance. The lower decoration surrounding the clock face consists of 8-foot figures of Yale worthies, such as Noah Webster, senior holding his dictionary, and Elihu Yale himself. Near the top are smaller student figures representing the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior classes. A closer look at the tower shows some odd things, like a man with a bird standing on his head on the lower right, and a bulldog puppy on the upper left. The Sterling Law Building has many grotesques, some of which are even critical of the legal profession. Lining the main entrance arches are vignettes demonstrating different aspects of the legal system. Some are symbolic, like this prisoner who must decide between the influence of an angel and the devil. Others are more brutally specific. Note the bag of loot in the thief's hand and the safe he broke into to steal it. Above the main entrance door is a relief depicting a lively professor teaching a less than lively class. A frequent theme found in the grotesque of this building is the results succumbing to the temptations of man's vices, like alcohol and laziness. Note that laziness isn't just portrayed by the position of his body, but by the fact that spiders have built their webs on him and his books, implying that neither has moved in a while. But note there are no webs on the liquor bottle on the lower left. That just moved. But there is hope for this well-dressed young lawyer. Note the owl for wisdom watching over him. Under a bay window along Wall Street are judge and policemen surrounding criminals that represent 3 of man's vices. There's a thief with a mask and rope for sneaking over walls for greed, a rather discreetly portrayed prostitute for lust, and a drunkard with an overflowing liquor bottle soaking his head for gluttony. Another vice portrayed in the building is gambling. In addition to gambling, he has turned his back on the church. There's a pipe on the lower left, so he's smoking and drinking. See the devil on the bottle? Notice a recurring anti-alcohol theme on some of the grotesques of this building. Keep in mind this building was built in 1930, before Prohibition was repealed, so the evils of alcohol were still widely touted. An interesting thing about this grotesque is a pair with another of a man piously reading the Bible, so you can contrast the good and the bad paths a person can take. Someone on one of my tour groups perceptively pointed out that of these 2 figures, it's the gambler on the left who is the one that's smiling. So I'll leave you to interpret the significance of that for yourselves. Other reliefs relating to the law, this one dramatizing punishment, and this one portraying the blinding of justice. Over a doorway in the courtyard, a policeman arrests a thief. Note the pearls the thief has stolen. On the opposite wall of the courtyard, there's a line of lawyers, punctuated on one end with a snail, which is a comment on the pace of the modern justice system. There's also an executioner to demonstrate one possible outcome of the proceedings. Some of the roofs are topped with different characters, like this bulldog in judge's robes. Note the S in his medallion for sterling. Others personify different, less than admirable characteristics of the legal profession, like this nicely dressed litigator with the head of a mule. Some stonework may look like generic decoration, but that doesn't mean you can't find something interesting in it, like these manacled hands decorating the ceiling of an exit portico. Payne Whitney Gymnasium is modeled after Liverpool Cathedral in England. Continuing the metaphor inside, the main lobby is encircled by figures of athletes, like this weightlifter, baseball player, and football player. These are reminiscent of Michelangelo's series of unfinished slaves on display in Florence. Like Michelangelo's, these figures seem to be struggling to free themselves from the physical constraints of the masonry. This elevates the physical exertion of athletes to a religious struggle, to free the soul of physical limitations and to aspire to a more enlightened existence. On the lighter side, playful animals decorate one of the entrances at Trumbull College. In the courtyards, subjects range from the domestic, like this cleaning woman with her brush and dustpan, to the fantastic, like this demon on the roof of the master's house. This is one of the only grotesques I've found that's painted. In fact, it's painted every year to look like various characters. This one represents the college's current dean, having a private moment. Location? Why, a roof and potty court, of course. Silliman College has incorporated the buildings that were originally part of the Sheffield Scientific School. Above the entrance, two strange heads sneer down at those entering. Next door is a building that was constructed by the St. Anthony Hall Society, a fraternity originally associated with the Sheffield Scientific School, but now the building is partially owned by the university. It features these grimly distorted figures spaced along its cornice. Even St. Anthony himself. St. Anthony was an ascetic who isolated himself in the desert for many years, his only companion being a pig. Lee Hall is in the university's School of Music. So why does it have these bruised and bandaged bulldogs carved into its front door? Why is there an angel of mercy above the entrance, and the rod of Asclepius too? That's because when this building was constructed, it was originally home to the University Health Center, where many sick and injured bulldogs came for treatment. As I have found doing research for this project, building histories can be more confusing than a family tree. Many of Yale's buildings are designed to look like they date from the Middle Ages, but the Hall of Graduate Studies is intended to look much older. The use of form and pattern make the building look as if it is left over from a combination of ancient cultures, Collegiate Gothic with some 1930s Art Deco styling mixed in. At the entrance, lifelike faces of graduate school dignitaries line the arches. Remember earlier when I was describing Berkeley College and mentioned the niches flanking its entrance? The Hall of Graduate Studies has niches around its entrance as well. These may seem empty, but if you're particularly curious, you can look up under the canopy and see something very curious. This is what you get for being so darn curious. I think it looks like Mr. Yuck, the green sticker that you could put on your cleansers so your kids don't get at them. Along the exterior walls there is sculpture that look like ancient sarcophagi. They have abstract bodies, but realistic faces. The faces are so realistic because the masons who sculpted them use the other masons as their models. The Hall of Graduate Studies has these totems that can be found along its York Street walls and look like they are from early Mesoamerican cultures. Also note the word Yale impressed in the brick on the lower right. Sterling Memorial Library is a library which is designed to be a medieval cathedral to knowledge. It is covered inside and out with grotesques. The entrance has symbols and text from many ancient cultures. Pictograms and hieroglyphs are a few of the types of ancient languages here that profess a scholar's love of knowledge and learning. There is even a pre-Nazi swastika. Before Hitler and the Nazis corrupted it, the swastika was an ancient symbol, meaning peace and prosperity. As you can see, the Nazis transposed and rotated their version. Judging by the date of Sterling Memorial Library's construction, this particular swastika is a victim of bad timing. A medieval scribe and scholar can be found on either side of its main front window arch. Figures in the cornices of the reading room, such as Leonardo da Vinci representing the fine arts, William Shakespeare representing literature, and Christopher Columbus representing geography, are symbolic of the variety of subjects that can be researched within. Now, personally, I find it ironic that Columbus represents geography, since he thought he was in India when he made landfall in the New World. I said Sterling Memorial Library was built to resemble a cathedral, and it even comes complete with a confessional. So the person you might be confessing to might be miles away because it's actually a phone booth. Note the old style phones they are using. Sadly, in this age of smartphones, it's now just storage. The library has a cruciform, or cross layout, as many medieval cathedrals do, and many fanciful and scary creatures reside on its ceiling, like this mermaid and bat. The exhibition hallway features many corbels between its windows. One shows you can find unexpected things in your studies, maybe something you'd rather not know, and apparently would make your hair stand on its end. Note the owl for wisdom in front of him, and death creeping up behind. No matter how hard you are studying, it's still important to keep a sense of humor. Note Urajoke in his book. Looks oddly similar to the text speak of today. Still others depict things that can distract a student from his studies, like smoking, he used to have a cigar between his fingers, drinking, lust, and just plain old laziness. Nice to know some things never change. Sterling Memorial Library predicts its own significance by depicting this guide giving a tour of the building. The figures at their shoulders are neighboring corbels, and there's a bulldog at the bottom. If it looks dark around the guide's mouth, it's because someone had recently put lipstick on him. Even the janitor's duties are immortalized. Outside of the star reading room, a variety of heads are spaced between the windows, representing the different cultures of the world. A Turk, an African tribesman, and an Eskimo are among them. This room is just inside the entrance from Wall Street and has a lot of decorative stonework. Inside its decoration is a hidden animal, and I don't mean the bird at the top. What is the strange creature concealed at the bottom of the sculpture? A large spider is hidden in this decoration. I'm no sculptor, but I would think that is no easy task to carve inside of such a tight space. Why go through the trouble to sculpt something which many people may not even see? When you hide a little surprise in the decoration, it forces those who do find them to look closer and appreciate all of the stonework, enhancing the overall experience for them, something to which I can personally attest. Just outside the entrance from Wall Street, a lamp is held by a disembodied hand, reminiscent of Thing from the Addams Family. Above the lamp is a beetle and its larvae, whose scientific name escaped me, but I do know that its larvae is commonly known as the bookworm. I must include one which I sarcastically call Pilgrims Progress. The unique way in which it portrays the uneasy relationship between Native Americans and Puritan settlers piqued my curiosity early on. This raw and brutal view of history was the first to make me realize that Yale's grotesques are more than just stuffy historic sculpture, and set me on the path to seek out as many as I could find. That having been said, I would like to update you on the progress of Pilgrim's Progress. Here's the photograph of Pilgrim's Progress from the previous slide. I took this photo over 10 years ago. Here is Pilgrim's Progress in a photo taken in 2017. See the difference? The Puritan's rifle has been blotted out. This was an attempt at political correctness. However, if you look closely, you can see the Native American's bow is still visible. Ironically, you can interpret this in a very un-PC way. Since only the Native American has a weapon, he is now portrayed as the aggressor. This only furthers the outdated stereotype of the uncivilized savage Indian preying on the defenseless European. If Marty McFly from Back to the Future has taught us anything, it's that you can't change the past without ruining the present. Now currently, if you go down to York Street to see this grotesque, this is right across from the entrance to Toad's Place, Pilgrim's Progress is gone. With all the controversy surrounding this editing of the grotesque, Yale finally removed it, and they just made a copy of the one on the other side of the gate, which is a tutor and a student. And so they transposed that and replaced it with that grotesque. Another decorative element at Yale that I want to show you is not a grotesque or gargoyle at all, but it does demonstrate the level of thought that was put into the details on campus. Many of Yale's Gothic buildings have some form of multi-pane steel casement windows. You'll notice in this photo that two of the panes look as if they've been cracked and repaired. Look at a few of these repairs and you'll notice that many of them are strangely similar, specifically a curve with another shorter one branching off it, so it looks like a Y, which just happens to be the first letter in the name of a familiar university. Is it a coincidence that so many of these repairs form a letter Y for Yale? It seems truly odd that so many window panes have randomly cracked in this way. Now this could be just a coincidence, a simple case of me spending too much time with the gargoyles and becoming a bit obsessive. After all, I told you I am lecturing in a safari outfit, and not all of these repairs look like this. But this type of repair does occur quite frequently around the campus, a bit too frequently in my opinion to be considered a mere coincidence. But I digress. Through the use of visual techniques like forced perspective, many references to literature, history, culture, and the sciences, the Yale campus is planned down to the smallest detail. Why? To cultivate a feeling of loyalty, unity, and sense of history and all those associated with the campus. When you set foot on Yale's campus, you know you have arrived somewhere special. Yale is an idea that transcends its architectural, spiritual, physical, scientific, and intellectual achievements. Yale the concept is much more than the sum of its parts. Yale's grotesques and gargoyles, along with its revivalist architecture, serve to deepen its historic foundation. There is much of the essence of Yale as Handsome Dan the Bulldog or the Yale Precision marching band. They are essential to the ideals and spirit of the university. The most difficult thing about putting together this presentation was deciding which images to leave out. There are many, many more. Or as I like to say, Yale is more grotesque than you can shake a student loan application at, the way any other financial aid document will do. So let me just say you don't have to travel to some exotic place in Europe to see interesting grotesques. It's as close as a trip to New Haven. So that's my lecture on Yale. I have since traveled to 9 other college campuses in search of grotesques, including Trinity College in Hartford, as well as out-of-state schools such as Duke and Princeton. Since I did the Yale book, Yale has constructed 2 new residence colleges with new grotesques. These are combined with my findings at other schools to make the Grotesque 10, amazing architectural sculpture from 10 American colleges and universities. Both books are available on their websites, as shown on the screen, and on Amazon. If you have any questions about my tours, lectures, or books, email me at mathew.duman@yahoo.com. mathew.duman@yahoo.com. That's mathew.duman@yahoo.com.